So let's continue with talking about the curious case of ethnogenesis in Thailand, specifically the origins of the ethnonym Thai Muslim. Now, I'm specifically interested in this case study, but there is nothing exceptional or special about this case study of a group which is known by one name, who call themselves by one name. Their preferred autonym is Malay, perhaps. There is nothing exceptional about this. So in different parts of present-day Thailand, at different times, different ethnic groups have called themselves by a number of autonyms. An autonym is a preferred ethnonym chosen for yourself. So this is different from an exonym. Remember, this is different from an exonym, which is used by outsiders. So an autonym is an emic term. An autonym is an emic ethnonym, and an exonym is an etic ethnonym. And so, although there are many Muslim populations in Thailand that have no problem with referring to themselves as simply Thais or as Thai Muslims, have no perception or no feeling of any longer being Malay. There are some who still do, there are some who don't, and those who don't are those that no longer speak the Malay language, or because of where they're living, particularly in Bangkok, there have been a range of cultural influences, Cham, Malay, Indonesian, Arab, Persian, and so there has been a process of hybridization. But these have been, we've looked at some of the processes. It is clear that in South Thailand, around Phuket, from Phuket, Phang, Krabi, Drang, Satun, even in Satun now, there are places where Malay is spoken. But in many of these places, although 100, 200 years ago, all of the place names were Malay, the Muslims there, they spoke Malay, as well as Thai, the further north there are. These days we assume that all of this part of the peninsula, they are Thai Muslims, they are Thai-speaking Muslims. So it's only been in the relatively recent past, the last 100 years, that Malay is no longer being regularly spoken in these parts of South Thailand. And so, but there's nothing exceptional about this. There's nothing exceptional in the sense that we see different changes in the way people refer to themselves all over the country, the way that Khmer refer to themselves, the way that some Lao-speaking Thai citizens who are Lao-speaking refer to themselves. And what is true there is true for Chinese and for Mon and for Karen and for Aka and Lahu and all sorts of smaller upland northern ethnic minorities. But there's something exceptional about this in another sense, because we see similar dynamics happening all over the world, and we see similar dynamics happening to the immediate south of Thailand, where for a number of reasons, particularly in recent history, through the political programs of newly independent rulers, of newly independent nation states. In Malaysia, we see an ethnic diversity that once existed being downplayed, and with rulers wanting to only refer to themselves with one ethnonym, and for subordinate minority ethnic identities to be downgraded. And so, in a sense, there's nothing extraordinary about Thailand's project of ethnogenesis, particularly after the 1930s. Because when we see what went on in present-day Malaysia, we can see some very interesting similarities. And I want to cite and recommend the work of Leonard Andaya, who has done a study of the creation of ethnic groups in the Straits of Malacca, on both sides of the Straits of Malacca. He looks at the construction of Malayness, of Minangkabau, of Chinese identity, and of Orang Laut or Sea Gypsy identity. And I really recommend that you take the time to read that book, a very important book, I would argue. But another piece of work which is being done, and we can go into full screen now, I think. There is a very important piece of work being done by an Australian anthropologist called Joe Kahn, and he wrote a book, The Other Malays, and he was someone who had lived and worked and studied in Sumatra for many years, and so when he went to, when he changed where he studied to Peninsular Malaysia, it was natural that he would be aware of Minang or Sumatra or immigrants from Sumatra. And he produces a number of things in his book called The Other Malays, and these include surveys of how population increased from 1901 to 1947. And he does some surveys in different states of Malaysia. And what is interesting to us is that there was a category of foreign Malays. Foreign Malays. And by this, he meant Muslims from Sumatra who spoke both Malay as well as Minang, Mandaling, Chinese, Batak to a lesser extent, and about how these bilingual Malay speakers from Sumatra and actually from Kalimantan as well, the way in which they migrated to the peninsula, and initially they were counted in censuses 2001, 2011, there's a number of censuses, British census, that were conducted. And when the British conducted these censuses, they counted Malays from elsewhere, not natively born on the peninsula, as a distinct unit. And so we see here the increase of this population along a range of states, and certain states, particularly on the west coast, had more immigrants from Sumatra. And we see all of these here. Okay, let's go out of full screen now. We can go out of full screen now. And just a few wrap-ups. And so what happened in Malaysia over a number of decades is that although Malays born on the peninsula were a significant population, the cultural geography of the peninsula changed with the British bringing Chinese labour to work in tin mines, Indian labour, indentured labour to work in rubber plantations. So that changed dramatically the cultural geography of what is now Malaysia, which was British Malaya. But in addition to that, we had large migration of bilingual Malay speakers. Most of them were Muslims, but they were from Sumatra, and they shifted to the peninsula, were initially counted as foreign Malays, but increasingly were just referred to as Malays. And so in Thailand and in Malaysia, we see very, very interesting parallel processes of an originally ethnically diverse population continuing to be ethnically diverse, but the level of ethnic diversity reducing. When one has been on the peninsula, we've come from Sumatra, we've been on the peninsula for 2 generations, we no longer speak the language of our grandparents, we only speak Malay, we are Muslims like the dominant population, we are just going to refer ourselves to Malay. And so this is, so if we use the term ethnogenesis, we have to also introduce a new term, which I would call ethnic defection. It's where it no longer makes sense for you to refer to yourself as being a Minang or being an Achinese. You are just Malay. And so similarly, it is a widespread phenomenon that some Malay Muslims in central Thailand initially, and then later around Phuket, Nakhon Tamarat, Panga, Krabi, Drang, in Thai-speaking parts of the south, formerly Malay speaking Muslims began to just refer to themselves as not as Malay, but as Muslims, and then in the 1930s, Thai Muslims. And so ethnogenesis can come about through 2 processes. First, it can be a top-down government initiative, such as what happened in Thailand in the 1930s. But ethnogenesis can also be effected through a grassroots ethnic defection, where groups who once referred to themselves as being Malays would call themselves Thai Muslims. And these processes were working in 2 places. They were working in Thailand, and they were working in British Malaya, and after that Malaysia, through a combination of top-down government initiatives of naming, of classifying, and we've dealt with that in previous lectures, as well as a grassroots. It's easier for me to refer to myself as being Thai, even though I am a Muslim and my parents called themselves Malay, and what is true in Thailand is also true in Malaysia. So, I hope you've enjoyed my analysis of ethnogenesis in Thailand, the curious case of Thai Muslims.